Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a long overdue edition of What Was I Thinking? I'm your host, as always, Soapbox Ant, joined by a special guest, Tina. What's going on?
Hey, what's up, Aunt? I'm doing
Thank you for
well.
joining. Glad to hear. Thank
hmm
you for joining me for a first and an episode that is long overdue. Like, I'm going to be trying something different with the channel. I'm going to do my very first watch along slash movie review for a
hmm
classic, a timeless film, a movie that doesn't really get talked about as much as it should, as my special guest will be sure to point out several times throughout the course of this stream.
hmm
Chasing Amy, from the wonderful vaulted mind of one Kevin Smith. And I should have mentioned off top, she's going to be my resident Kevin Smith expert. So whenever I review one of his films, expect to have her on the panel. It might be other people, but she's going to be like the one we defer to for all things Kevin Smith. Like, I'm a Kevin Smith aficionado myself, but she knows the nuggets, the details, like those little intricacies that I might overlook or miss.
Yep. I'm that I said today I finally get to use my ridiculous amount of knowledge of Kevin Smith for good.
Hey, look, there's no such thing as ridiculous knowledge. I swear I've accumulated all of my ridiculous knowledge dating back to like the early 90s for this moment. I was preparing for YouTube before YouTube was a thing, so I feel accomplished.
You have somewhere to go. I was thinking about like before this, we were if you ever had your hands on a camcorder, I remember playing around with my friends and getting, our parents' camcorder and, making commercials and stuff. So we were definitely the precursors to YouTube.
And honestly, you remember the voice recorder from Home Alone 2?
Oh, the Talk Boy. I had one of
Yeah, yeah,
those. Yeah.
thank you too. Yeah, that's what it was. Showing my age here, dating myself, but I had one. I got one of those for Christmas. I love that thing. King could get you in trouble because you might have been
Yeah.
recording the wrong thing. And unlike the movie, the repercussions were real. There was nobody to yell "cut" in my case,
Yeah.
but those were
But
fun. Those were fun.
let it be, I think it was the first test of receipts for like they have on the phone receipts. We had the Talkboy receipts, and if your mom said you could stay up later, you could record her saying that to you and then play it back, and she can't dispute you. So
Uh-huh.
that was the first. Uh, we were the first generation of having receipts, thanks to Talkboy.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And if you wanna, I don't know if you still have any of your old recordings. You ever heard of something called Legacy Box?
Oh yeah, I have to. I want to get that because I have on DVD some old family movies, and I know after a while, even the well, what do you play it on? Really?
Yeah,
Does anybody have a DVD player anymore?
yeah. It's like I still have some things like VCR, but like just like with time and age, a lot of things deteriorate over time. I feel like, especially with VHS, with this digital stuff, that's pretty somewhat long lasting, but even with those, like dust, scratches, you never know. So I have heard about the legacy box thing, courtesy of Pop Meets World. Not a cheap plug.
Mm.
They're not affiliated, even though I do listen to every episode in case they ever see this. No, I will consider getting legacy box because you do want to preserve those type of memories. Even if it's like, movies like Chasing Amy. If you got the old school VHS, you might want to watch it with the with those vibes. I don't know about you, but like sometimes I like to watch things in the original format. I mean, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, streaming is cool, but it's just something about being able to watch something with the old school track marks and just it kind of takes you back to a simpler time.
Well, I miss DVD extras and some of the
Ah,
little factoids I have about this movie come from the DVD extras that I
Commentary track.
watched, because I do have all of Kevin Smith's catalog on DVD, and I don't care if I have to reinvent a DVD player in order to play them again. I will keep my DVD collection of Kevin Smith stuff. That's precious. So
Same
yeah.
here. I actually have a story about that coming up. But before we get to that aspect of things, I'm actually going to cue up the trailer to educate some of the younger viewers who may not be familiar with Kevin Smith or this film. So if you bear with me
Mhm.
as I try to be a professional on this program here. Let's see. And
Spot a long
here we go.
face, Horace. I'm just having a little girl.
Wrong one. Coming up later. Let's see. Sorry about that, folks.
What a
Uh,
mouth there on Joey Lauren Adams, right?
yeah.
She has such a sweet voice. You never expect F bomb to drop like that.
A lot.
Here we go. Here we go. Sorry about that, folks.
Spot a long face, Horace. I'm just having a little girl trouble. Big pressing charges. I get that a lot.
Holden McNeil was set in his ways. The way he worked, the way he lived, and the way he thought love should be. But then, she showed up.
Let me guess. You like her.
This girl loves me.
There's something you should know.
She got a boyfriend.
Well, no.
Then what's to know, my friend?
And this girl's got a secret that's going to drive him crazy.
I like you, Holden. I'd really like us to be friends.
What'd I tell you? She just needs the right guy.
What's up?
And if you come pick me up, I'll be your best friend.
Now, the only thing standing in Holden's way is the truth.
I can't take this.
Can't take what?
I love you. Not in a friendly way.
How was your pseudo date?
Okay, I'm telling you, she's never even been with a guy.
You're dating a guy?
So what if it is true?
You know you have no shot at getting her into bed.
I take it that's not good.
Miramax Films presents a comedy that tells it like it feels.
She's been around and seen things we've only read about in books.
So what'd you do last night?
Got lucky.
Chasing Amy.
Oh, Miramax.
Uh, let's just try to focus on the good times. Yeah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
Good vibes only. Let's see. So, man. So, what did you think of that trailer? Did it take you back? Did it kind of like bring back some old school memories for you?
Well, you got the old movie phone voice guy, right? I think that's the same guy. Remember movie phone?
Yeah.
Okay, kids, movie phone. Small education here was when you would call up, right? Remember,
Yeah.
and see
Yeah.
what time the movies were playing and what movies were playing at what movie theater before the internet,
Yeah.
and you had the movie phone guy.
222
So
tone.
yeah, that sounds like him. Um, I could be wrong though. I know there was a guy who voiced the trailers for like every movie in the 90s back then. So that's my first thought. So,
Um,
yeah.
so did you feel like it gave too much away, or because I know nowadays, like with trailers, that the argument is you'll see like the best parts of the movie like over the course of a 2 minute trailer. Just based off of that, like let's just say going in, you had no knowledge of Kevin Smith, the VSQ universe. Would that trailer educate you enough or entice you enough to want to see the film?
Well, are we now? Or are we in 1997 when it came
Uh,
out?
at the time.
Oh, at the time. Well, I think that there was probably a lot of buzz. I saw it blindly. I didn't see it when it came out because we were like 12 years old, right? Well, we weren't allowed to. Oh, I wasn't allowed to watch movies like that.
Oh,
Like, forget it. Um,
yeah. My
so
Kevin Smith.
I go ahead.
No, my Kevin Smith knowledge actually was post date, but not because I couldn't watch his stuff, but it was just like I discovered his stuff late. And it's kind of weird because I would see his like stuff because I'm a nerd. Like, once again, I'm gonna date myself. I'm gonna be dating myself a lot, folks. So get used to it on this. I grew up a big time movie buff. I lived in video stores. My favorite
Mhm.
was West Coast Video because they had all the obscure stuff.
Mm,
Blockbuster was Blockbuster, but West Coast Video for me and Hollywood Video to an extent was where you went for the obscure stuff. And I
yeah,
would
West
and I
Coast.
and I'll even throw Suncoast in there, even though they was kind of pricey. And I would always see Clerks. I had no idea about Kevin Smith,
Mhm.
James Allen, about none of that. But it was always one of those things I would always see, but I would just kind of like skim over it. And then you fast forward a couple years, I want to say like around 2001 ish. Chris, friend of mine, Chris well. Um, he had introduced me and some other friends to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Mhm.
And right off the top, it was like this was my type of movie. And once again, I had no idea who Kevin Smith was. I had no idea about the universe, but the whole $15, little man, like it was. I was singing that for like months, months,
Mhm.
to the point of annoying people
15
around
bucks,
me.
little man. Yeah,
Put that shit in my hand, and
that's
then
him.
and then he had told me, well, he told me the story about Kevin Smith, and next thing you know, I immersed myself. So I went to
Mhm.
Best Buy, wherever I could go, and I literally scooped up. I call them the Classic Five. So it's kind of like similar to like Spike Lee with the original classics. You got She's Gotta Have It, School Days, Do the
Mhm.
Right Thing, More Better Blues, Malcolm X. I'm a big fan of Spike Lee, and it's those classic five that I always go to. I like his other stuff, but I always start with those. Same thing with Kevin Smith. You got Clerks, you got Mallrats, you got Chasing Amy, you got Dogma, you got James Silent Bob Straight Back. And I feel like if you watch those back to back to back, they're different, but they're all connected. And I like how with those specific movies right there, there's a lot of callbacks. So like if you watch one, it's almost like you have to watch those in order, in my opinion, if you're going to like binge his stuff, because there's so many references and callbacks. Even with Chasing Amy, he was 3 movies in, but there are callbacks to Clerks, there are callbacks to Mallrats that if you actually pay attention, it's like, ah. But if you don't know the story, if you don't know the history, they're going to kind of like go over your head as a throwaway line.
Yeah. But I like through like I love that about he loves to put Easter eggs in all of his movies, everything to some people's ad nause as not ad nauseum, but like I love it about his movies and I love it about him because he just, and especially now he's more leaned into I'm a movie fan that get has the privilege I got the privilege to make movies and people or a significant amount of people just want to watch them. So like
Yeah.
he's always goes off of that kind of um attitude, which that's his charm. But like I think at this point watching them if you've never seen them, watching them chronologically is really helpful because you'll get to pick one Easter egg from another. There's always a callback. There's a whole trope of like Dante, the actor who plays Dante, he's in other movies and his characters are always a different first name, but his last name is always Hicks.
Yeah, Brian O'Halloran. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Brian
I mean,
O'Halloran.
Yeah, and speaking of it, I'm actually glad you brought that up. So we're going to go through some of the notable cast members in Chasing Amy.
Hmm.
First off, this guy. Let's see here. Let's see. Let's see. Start with. Let me see. This
Oh
guy
yeah.
right here. Now, no introduction needed. Ben Affleck, who
Hmm.
I don't know. It just seems like all of my favorite directors. Whether you want to talk about Martin Scorsese, I mentioned Spike Lee, Kevin Smith. They all had like they all had their muse. They had that one person that they worked with that kind of defined their career because they either got them like when they were starting to peak or right at the beginning. For Martin Scorsese, it was Robert De Niro. For Spike Lee, it was Denzel Washington. For Kevin Smith, it was Ben Affleck.
Hmm.
And in the case of Ben Affleck, he pretty much got Ben Affleck at just the right time. Like just like he was like starting to percolate a little bit, but
Yep.
he got him before he blew up. So like he got him in Mallrats, which I don't know. I don't know. Like I don't know about you, but just I couldn't buy Ben Affleck in any capacity as a bully. I think he's a good actor as long as he's not playing any type of superhero.
Hmm.
Uh, that and just Ben Affleck with facial hair just should be a crime. Just I don't know. I feel like whenever I see Ben Affleck in a film with facial hair with a goatee, I feel like he should be on some type of list. But beyond that, I was a fan of his performance in the movie. What say you?
Well, it was really so. Not to take too much time up, but I did want to share this with everybody because I think this will appeal to one, the people who are new to Kevin Smith or trying out Kevin Smith for the first time, and then uh because this is a total departure. This is the first like real role Ben Affleck gets that showcases more of his acting ability. Um, other than what he did as a teen actor, and then like he
Goodwill
was
Hunting.
in Dazed and Confused. If you've ever seen that, he
Yeah.
plays like a real jerk,
Mhm.
and so it was really Kevin who made him like spotlight that. But I do have my nephew, my wonderful nephew, won this in a raffle. It is a book called uh Kevin Smith's Secret Stash, and it says the definitive visual history. So this book is really amazing. It's hard to find. I guess you could find it on Amazon or something. But he actually won this for me in like a raffle, I think it was, or an auction.
Mhm.
And there's a whole funny story about that. If we have time later, I can tell you. It's signed. It was given to him by Kevin, and he gave it to me because he loves his aunt and he knows I'm a big fan. But moving along, long story short, I have in this. There's all kinds of nuggets of awesome, like I said, Easter eggs. There's Easter eggs in this book, and it goes through every single movie that Kevin's done up to until recently. But in it, there is a letter written by uh, Ben Affleck, and it is entitled "Who is Kevin Smith?" And if you'll indulge me, I'll read to you, and it gives a little bit of a background that I don't think a lot of people know about how he got the role in Chasing Amy, and it gives Ben Affleck a chance to like kind of you know uh, talk
Yep.
about his love and their friendship. So his love for Kevin and their friendship, and this is a pretty recent. This is in the last few years that he wrote
So
this, so this is pretty current. So is it cool if I read it?
sure. So you're basically going to give us the backstory to how Ben Affleck became Holden McNeil in Chasing Amy.
And this is in his own. This is in Ben Affleck's own words. So this is his telling of the story. You can go on YouTube anywhere, and if you watch An Evening with Kevin Smith, he has his own version, but this is Ben Affleck's. So
Okay. Shoot.
he used to go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Shoot. No, I said shoot with it.
Okay. So this is how it starts. I get the feeling that I'm going to be the only contributor to what will undoubtedly be a very funny book who does not write anything funny. I thought about trying, but the truth is, of all the ways I could give Kevin shit, and it's not that a few don't come to mind, the truth is, those are neither the most interesting nor relevant things to me about him. So I'll contribute what matters most to me about Kevin and leave the funny business to those who are actually good comedians. It's pretty simple. Kevin Smith is largely responsible, judge him as you will, for my career and the opportunity I've had to make a living doing what I love for the last 25 years. I met him in an audition for Mallrats, where, as had become a pattern, I was cast in the role of essentially another meathead throwing charming stoners against their lockers. Even at the age of 23 or so, this had already become something of a frustrating trend in my career. Playing the meathead anti Semitic bully in School Ties, the steroid abuser in HBO's unforgettable epic A Body to Die For. People should write these down. The single unappealing character in Dazed and Confused, a movie that likely holds the world record for all time number of appealing characters, and so on. And Anthony, I think you could do Dazed and Confused as a podcast for sure. So when I auditioned for Mallrats at the Universal lot, I was not at all surprised to be asked to play the most insufferably douchey character in the movie. Given that I always considered myself a pretty normal and nice guy, I was beginning to wonder if I was missing something in the way of self awareness. I mean, when one director thinks you'd be perfect to play a gigantic asshole, you can tell yourself it might be on the merits of your performance. When it starts to become the defining theme of your career, it might be time to worry. So Kevin hired me to throw Jason Lee against his locker and wear a suit with big shoulder pads and lurk around a mall in Minnesota, playing the foil to his tribute to Commedia dell'arte pantomime and Jason Mewes's undeniably charming and brilliant protagonist. During the course of filming, however, Kevin and I struck up a friendship, or more accurately, as I was secretly a huge fan of Clerks, which inspired and emboldened Matt Damon and I to imagine we could write and make our own movie. I obsequiously followed him around and tried to laugh at his jokes, still some of my best acting, and essentially sucked up to him as hard as humanly possible in a desperate attempt to convince him I might not actually be a huge, irredeemable prick and doomed to play one for life. In a stroke of luck that changed my life, it worked. We became friends. His wit was incisive and undeniable, and his candor, humility, kindness, and charm were so evident he was impossible not to love, and he tolerated me. Over time, we kept in touch. Then one day, out of the blue, he called me up and just flat out offered me the lead in his next movie. I had never been offered a part in any movie without auditioning, and certainly not one as smart and provocative and heartfelt as Chasing Amy. Only later did I discover that in order to have me in the movie rather than the stars the studio wanted, He had to essentially forego his entire budget and more or less make it on the scale of Clerks. This may seem unexceptional now, but I promise you it was both unprecedented and a massive risk on his part. No one had ever fought to cast me so forcefully before, and no one has, to my knowledge, done so since. So not only did I get the opportunity to play a fully realized and intelligent human being, but I also got to be the lead, and the movie went so well written and directed. It exposed me to a broad audience and finally gave me the opportunity to do what I had always wanted to do. You would think that would be enough, but then, during the production of Chasing Amy, the studio was going to make Goodwill Hunting essentially the studio that was going to make Goodwill Hunting essentially backed out, and we had a short amount of time to find someone who would make it with us in it. There was a lot of money being billed against the movie, a practice common in Hollywood to both offset the costs studios incur making overall deals. Basically, they try to pay for their overhead this way and make it prohibitively difficult to get the movie made somewhere else. Miramax had already passed on Goodwill Hunting initially, and everyone else who had been interested in the movie had lost interest. There was sort of a if I was your second choice prom date, I don't know, I don't want to go with you phenomenon that takes place. So we were stuck. It was over. They were going to maybe make Goodwill Hunting, but we were told we would be lucky to get tickets to the premiere. We were profoundly and truly effed. But Kevin, as he is fond of saying, read the script on on the crapper and stayed on the crapper to finish it, and he liked it enough to give it to Miramax's John Gordon, our creative director on Chasing Amy, who lobbied for the movie and pushed the company to buy it and take a chance on us as actors, which they did. Once Robin Williams signed, that is, which instantly guaranteed them a profit based on foreign pre-sales alone, since the movie cost 15 million, not exactly the profile encouraged that the studio later presented it as, but we were in no position to complain. Kevin saved that movie for us. We had a lot of success with that movie, even winning the Oscar, where I forgot to thank the one guy who literally made it possible, Kevin Smith. I swore if I ever had the chance to be up there again, I would thank him, and 15 years later, I did get the chance, and I forgot again. So maybe all those people who cast me as the asshole were onto something. Kevin and I became great friends. I adored him, and I adore him today. We made a bunch of movies together, and those experiences count as some of the best days of my life professionally. It was truly a joy to come to work for him every day because we loved each other and had fun. And what more could you possibly ask for in the course of living, of earning a living? Also, I didn't have to sleep on his couch and hear him have sex during any of the movies after Chasing Amy, my only contractual demand. I could fill the pages of this book with the details of the time we worked together, but I'm not much for sharing personal stories, and Kevin has already milked each story for every nickel it is worth on stage, on DVD, on Smodcast, and to basically anyone who would throw a nickel in his hat on the subway platform. So I'm sure you've heard them before. And to be perfectly honest, that was one thing that was different about Kevin and me. Oddly, I'm forced to admit we are a great deal alike, or at least I flatter myself into believing as much. We certainly got along as well as two people can. He wanted to be public. He loves to share stories, whether it was his colonoscopy or his sex life or his opinion of someone else's work. Kevin thrives on being a storyteller, truly in every sense. This became evident to me at a time when I felt like hiding from the world and living in a bunker and resented the way the press would boldly lie at my expense, returning me ironically to the role of the insensitive jerk who was arrogant and would paddle freshmen for sport. Kevin was so public, and I felt such a desperate need to be private, and the entertainment journalism, an odd phrase since so little of it qualifies as either journalism or entertainment, world at its big bang moment of massive expansion that I retreated from him and our friendship because I was so adverse to any kind of further public exposure. And to be part of Kevin's life is like being friends with a novelist or screenwriter who writes personal stories. You're going to end up in one, like it or not. That is probably the thing I regret most about those years of my life. Feeling under siege led me away from Kevin because I was seeking a more private existence. Of course, it didn't prevent me from seeking his counsel when I wanted to start directing or showing him my first movie before anyone and taking courage from his confidence in me. Doubtlessly feigned some of his best work for sure. And then he asked me to come work with him again. And it was later in my life, and I had grown and come to care a lot less about what the press said. There was a lot of other people in the crosshairs, and I realized I had wasted precious years of his friendship and even risked missing him. He had a heart attack, and after the terror I felt at the prospect of losing him, I thought, I know the last thing that went through his mind would have been, what picture of me will they use during the in memoriam portion of the Oscars? Kevin Smith changed my life. Kevin Smith gave me a career. Kevin Smith believed in me as a director and helped me make it a second time in this business. So please direct all credit and or rotten vegetables to La Presa Drive. And if there is anything private about Kevin and his anatomy he hasn't already revealed, I will be happy to share with anyone all I know. Lastly, Kevin Smith is about the best example I can think of as the kind of father and man I strive to be. Kevin Smith, I am profoundly lucky to say, is my friend, and I love him very, very much. To say I am in his debt is whatever comes after understatement in the thesaurus. So let me say officially, here and now, and I know it's not from a stage, but honestly, it's kind of better that way. Thank you, Kevin Smith. You made it all possible. So there you go.
Wow, that was there were some gems in there in terms of humor. So, but I could tell he's self-deprecating. But that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. I like seeing that. And to be honest with you, him being friends with Kevin makes me hate him a little less. The only thing I really don't like was the Bennifer thing, but um I don't I don't not like Ben Affleck. And I actually think he was a pretty dope Batman. I might get get shit for that. Sorry, Anthony. You might get a lot of comments for that, but I actually think he was a pretty good sulky, old, broody Batman.
I'll be honest. I was so turned off from his turn as Daredevil that I didn't even
Mm,
bother. I wasn't. I didn't even bother with Batman. So I have no recollection, no memory of his performance in Batman, just because. I don't know, man. Like just there, like once again, phenomenal actor, and I'm guessing like the comic book people, the movie they were thinking like, oh, Ben Affleck, Daredevil, we can make it work. It didn't work. It didn't work. So
mhm.
but beyond that, because we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of the film once we go through the casting here. But first, initial like, what did you think of his like performance overall in Chasing Amy?
Um, it's so interesting because I have two impressions. One is the 14-year-old me that saw it first, And like this was the type of guy I went for back then. So back then, you know, it was kind of wild to me, and I could totally see why, you know, the him and the character of Alyssa Jones get together. But then me, older and wiser, and having had a relationship in my 20s at the time that, you know, when I finally got to be the age that these two are in the movie, like now I can see um that like his you can tell he's a 25-year-old man, and he's had only so much experience with women, but at the time you think you have tons of experience because you've been dating since you're like 12 or 13, and that 10 years or something seems like a lot of time, but I don't really think you start getting into real relationships until you're about this age. And you know, nothing against I've met some really mature young people, but I do think that you don't really get certain relationships until a certain time in your life. And so you can and I think actually if Kevin Smith thought that he was perfect for this role, it's like the other side of the sword of him. Yes, he played a meathead type guy, but it's that previous perception of him that let him sell the ignorance that you see, you know, him display. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean it as like, you know, not he's a bad guy. I I think it's ignorance in just lack of wisdom, lack of knowledge, which he learns, you know, the character grows up, and I'll give Ben Affleck a lot of credit because he was able to reach I think he was able to reach the depth to show you that this character grows up in this film. That he starts out one way and you see how immature he is, and then, you know, even though he throws around really big words and he seems like a brooding intellectual comic book, you know, creator, whatnot, um like you still see how immature he is, but then you also see him grow up, and I think that's a huge credit to Ben Affleck because I really think this, like he said in the beginning of the letter that I read, this was the vehicle for him to be able to do. I think if Ben Affleck doesn't do this film, he doesn't do Good Will Hunting. Like, even though like in Good Will Hunting, his character is a total goof. Um, but you're not able to accept Good Will Hunting. And then I'll throw it even further. Ben Affleck doesn't do this movie. How do you believe him in movies like Jersey Girl? How do you believe him in movies like Argo? You know? So this movie really is that vehicle for people. Somebody saw him and they were like, "Oh, this is what Ben Affleck can do." Okay. And then you know, he and I you can tell Kevin knew that um that Ben instinctively was going to go on the trajectory he did as an actor because you can see it in this film.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my opinion of his performance. I don't think it's and we'll get to that. I hope we'll get to this. Um But in my opinion, one of the reasons why I love this movie, and I will die on the hill of this is my favorite Kevin Smith movie, um, is because there's a monologue that he gives. Now, I can tell from knowing Kevin that Kevin definitely wrote that monologue, but
Oh,
the
hold that
way.
thought. I actually have it
w-
queued up for later.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I know where
Um,
you're going with that. So
yeah,
I came
that
prepared.
monologue, he delivers it so well that I remember, and I would even say still to this day, but I remember the first time watching it as a 14-year-old girl thinking to myself, I wish a guy would talk about me. I wish a guy would express or would have the ability to express to me how he feels about me like this. And
Yeah,
it's amazing to me that like it's written this way, and then not only is it written this way, but Ben is able to deliver it. And I think I would be shocked if we asked Kevin, do you think Ben hit it perfectly? And him not to say, oh, yeah, he hit it perfectly. Or there was something he could have done here, but other than that, it's pretty. No, I think he hit the mark perfectly because you can tell when it makes you, how it makes you feel as he delivers this monologue.
yeah,
So if you, that's what I'll say about that.
yeah. Yeah. We'll definitely get in it because I actually have some thoughts on that, and it's funny you mentioned that aspect of it because obviously a lot of the film is based around real life experiences. Uh, Kevin Smith, his dating life. It's no secret that at the time he was dating the Alyssa Jones character played by Joey Lauren Adams. So a lot of that monologue was based in real life. A lot of the and honestly, in doing some research for the film, this actually kind of created a lot of real life strife in their relationship, which is wow. You would think that it would be therapeutic in a lot of ways because you'd be like you're working together, you're getting some emotions out, but sometimes it has the opposite effect, at least with one or both of the parties in terms of what's expressed. And I came across that just in different interviews and different clips that I watched. So that part of it was fat. That monologue, it makes that monologue that you just broke down and that we'll get into a little later that much more interesting if you know like the backstory behind the words.
Well, the one thing I know you watched the little documentary thing,
Yeah.
um, but, and I didn't see that, which, there you go. That's the one thing you got me on. Um, is, so if you guys ever want to watch or listen to, Smodcasts, there is a portion of Kevin's. It's just Kevin. It's Kevin, and it's called with him and Scott Mosier, and I forget what it's called now. But it's not Hollywood Babylon. It's like it's him and Scott Mosier, which is his longtime friend and producer from film school. And he's in a lot of the movies too. He's in this movie and he
Yeah.
produced this movie. But he he went through a series of tapes called Emo Kev, and so he would tape himself, like he would do like an audio diary. And what's great is he found archived voice recordings of his video diaries, like leading up to the point as he's writing Clerks, leading up to the point where he writes Clerks. And he calls some of those tapes Emo Kev. And at the time, he is dating a girl that he is really smart. She's an English major at Brown. I think she went to Brown. And they're dating, and he's not in college. He's not doing anything. He feels like he's not doing anything with his life. He wants to go to film school. And so that this story, what I heard, this script is amalgamation of his relationship with that girl, and then Joey Lauren Adams contributed a lot.
Yeah,
And a lot of, and like you said, a lot of their relationship is reflected in this movie too.
yeah. Like I said, it's a lot of nuggets that I found
Yeah.
along the way. Apparently, Scott Mosier. Funny you mentioned him. He actually had a crush on the director of a movie called Go Fish that came out around the same time as Clerks. Long
Mhm.
story short, they became friends. It turns out she was a lesbian,
Mhm.
and they developed. Obviously, it didn't go anywhere romantically, but they developed
Mhm.
like a deeply romantic friendship is the best way I can describe it. Like they were
Yeah.
close, but it wasn't like a romantic close. It was just like you're my very close friend close, and a lot of that she was actually in the movie as well. When they did the scene where Joey was singing at the club, she was actually like the hostess to give people a frame of reference. I want to say her name because I know I'm going to butcher it. It's like Giovanni Taylor or something like that.
Yeah. Is she the one that introduces Alyssa?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew she was familiar. And I also think there is, if you are a punk fan, if you're a Riot Girl fan, I think there's a member, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's a member of the punk band Slater Kinney. She's playing the guitar, and there's a member of Slater Kinney uh, in that band that's playing while Joey Lauren Adams. So there's a lot of like, that's why I said like, it's really, I really love the like subculture 90s club. But what's remarkable about this is now, what I'll reveal about myself, and I'm totally okay with that, is that I identify as queer, and so for me, but I wasn't out then when I first saw it. So for me, that's my first uh I guess view of what possibly a lesbian bar looks like. And it wouldn't be until I was, I think, like 20 or 21 that I actually went. It's not around anymore. It's called Sisters. It's here. It was here in Philadelphia for a long time, but they closed it. I don't
Mhm.
think there's actually any lesbian bars around in Philadelphia anymore. I could be wrong. But that was my first like, oh, that's a lesbian bar. And but it was because I had no experience with that, like that the whole ruse that plays out in that scene was so it fooled me too, you know. So I'm the dumb idiot, just like Holden McNeil is as
No.
she's singing to him.
Let
Yeah.
me correct myself. The person I was referring to, her name is Genevieve Turner. So I want to make sure I had
Okay.
that on record. So apologies for butchering that name. But man, I could tell we're gonna be going down a rabbit hole on this.
Yeah.
Next
Yeah.
up on the cast list, 'cause
You could do an episode on Go Fish, to be honest,
yeah,
because that was another really like groundbreaking film, and not a lot of people have seen that either. That was like Go Fish and Kids, and there was another film
yeah,
that was really like underground, that was like, if you didn't see it, like you would get it passed along, you know, if you were a
yeah,
film person, or a
yeah,
cinephile as they call it. That's how
yeah,
you would know about these movies, but otherwise you didn't know about them, you know.
yeah. And it's like certain things I heard of through like a lot of word of mouth, but they just like weren't on my radar as like must see. Like I said, the Go Fish film, I did hear about it, but I just never took the time to watch it. But because of the time, and doing some research for this film, I'm gonna have to change that. But next up, one of my
Mhm.
favorites, uh, Man, let me see here. Get this guy on here. Uh, let's see. Got that in there.
Oh
Jason,
yes, Jason
Jason,
Lee.
Jason Lee, Banky Edwards. Right now, right off the bat, I can't say enough good things about Jason Lee, just in terms of my sensibilities and what I like in film and just certain characters. Just, I guess I'm a fan. I like Jason Lee for the same reasons that I'm a Charlie Sheen fan, for the same reason that I'm a David Spade fan. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. I'm a big fan of uh sarcasm and just like just deadpan senses of humor. And
Mm.
they just have a way of saying things that like cut to the bone, but
Oh yeah.
they just cut to the bone and just it's just like funny. Like and it's just like I feel like Jason Lee represents the best of both worlds with them. Like with Charlie Sheen is like more deadpan and just like straight to the point.
Mhm.
Similar to David Spade, but like with Jason Lee, I feel like he's like an amalgamation of both because he'll say something that'll cut to the bone and then laugh at his own joke. And normally I think that's so cringe when you when you laugh at your own jokes. But like it's normally funny, so I can't get mad at him. Like it's like yeah, I gotta pat myself on the back because that was a good one. So yeah,
Yeah. And here's my question for Kevin, but I'm afraid to ask it because we
I think I
we've
know where you're
been
going with this.
to we've been to Kevin things, and Kevin, you if you're the first person, you really need to be the first person in line for the Q&A because he takes 2 hours to answer a question. I love him, but nobody else gets their question answered. So, I'm afraid to ask this question, but I'm going to do it anyway. Um so my question is, did Jason Lee's portrayal, was that how Kevin how Jason Lee is that exactly what Kevin wanted when he was writing those Banky, and some people say his Banky and his Brody are the same. But no, they are not. They are
No,
not. And that we can, if you want, we can talk about the distinctions between Brody and Banky. But um, I want to ask him that because this it's hard for me to believe that he didn't just say, Jason, just be yourself. Like, because this is so, like, I feel like this is Jason Lee, but I also feel like Jason Lee just knew, like, Kevin wrote a character and Jason Lee just happened to be that character. Like, and
I
I want to know if that's how Kevin Smith feels about Jason Lee and his portrayals of Brody and Banky.
I think I can blow your mind with something because um one of the in doing some research, I remember a documentary I came across, and they were talking about Jason. Of course, they interviewed Jason Lee for it, and he basically said that initially when he read the script, he was actually concerned, which blew my mind, about some of the language and the dialogue used, which is wild to say
Mhm,
because this came out in the '90s, and this was very for the time it was a forward thinking movie, even though it did get a lot of blowback. And I'm going to actually ask you about that in a second, once I finish this thought here. But he was actually concerned with a lot of the language that came out or that he was being tasked with delivering because he didn't want to come across, because people are crazy, especially back then. He didn't want to
mhm,
give the perception of this these views represent the real person, because even though like there's a character and there's the real person, a lot of people can't delineate between the two. Like
mhm,
a lot of people to this day will look at a Robert De Niro and see, oh, you're a monster, you're a gangster. Same thing with Joe Pesci, because those are the characters that they're synonymous with playing for years upon years upon years. So Jason Lee didn't want these things on record being said, and then it's just like, ugh. So it looks like, from the best I can tell, at least with the verbiage. I don't want to say like the delivery. The delivery was all him.
Hmm.
The swagger, the personality, the oomph. He brought that character to life. But in terms of the dialogue, I don't think he was on board with. He probably had to be talked into a lot of the dialogue.
Right. I mean, and that makes sense because, um, and even like the way he is looking at especially the girl before she kisses Alyssa. Well, I mean, I maybe you knew this already, but that was his wife at the time.
Ah, see, I didn't know
So
that. See,
the girl that kisses Alyssa is kissing Joey Lauren Adams. Basically, is he's watching his wife at the time kissing Joey Lauren Adams. So he must have went through a lot in this movie. But it's a testament to his friendship with Kevin Smith that they're still friends after that, and he still managed to come back to play the great Azrael, which that's another movie to do is Dogma, which I just went with Darnell to see in the movie theater.
yeah.
Um, 25 years ago since its release, and that's another wow. I love that movie. Like that's my second favorite. So
And
Chasing Amy comes out, and then the next movie he does is Dogma. So you can see where my love affair was starting to take bloom with
and,
Kevin Smith.
I'll give a disclaimer, not a disclaimer, but just like anybody that has a copy of Dogma, either VHS or like myself, it was a collector's edition DVD that I had picked up around the time that I got into Kevin Smith from early 2000s. Hold on to those because
Hmm.
like right now, like that is a very hard film to come by. I mean, you can find it if you're creative, but in terms of like an official release on any type of streaming platform, even just finding like the DVD. Like if you do find it on like an Amazon or eBay, you're gonna pay out the you know what for it because
Well,
like
you
he
do
doesn't
you
he
know do you know
sorry
the politics behind that,
yeah I know it's tied up with he who should not be
Miramax?
named yeah Miramax and
Yeah,
yeah a
yeah.
lot of his
Kevin
films are
just
tied
got
up.
the rights back for it.
Oh wow
Kevin, Kevin just got the right back. That's why he could release it. That's why he can have it in his movie theater, his Smodcastle movie theater. Um, yeah, he fought to have the rights brought back, and I mean, yeah,
so that must have
he
just
it,
been recently because I wasn't aware was this just recently
yeah, it's just recently that
ah
in the last after the last like case where you know who went you know where. He didn't have any more power, so Kevin was able to win those rights back. So now he can kind of distribute it a little bit. You'll see it. It's still going to be rough, but because there's still some other red tape tied up with it, but the
yeah.
fact that it was able to be re-released in the movie theaters is a result of that.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you, you mentioned you had saw it for the 25-year anniversary. Did you notice any changes or edits that might have had to been made due to that red tape, or was it pretty much the same movie still?
Oh, it was the same movie. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like sitting in there quoting it like and it's very rare that you can go to a movie in the movie theater, other than like something like Rocky Horror Picture Show and like quote it. I was going through every line. Try not to be annoying though because I had shown it to Darnell like briefly, but he never watched it all the way through until we went to the movie theater. So I was trying not to ruin it too much for him. Um,
Yeah.
but it's fun to go with people who haven't seen it before, because I think like even if you don't know who Kevin Smith is and you just go see that movie, it's a standout. And you got like Alan Rickman, Chris Rock,
Yeah.
Selma Hayek, like that's enough. Enough
Lin-
said.
Linda Florentina. And honestly, When I yeah, Linda Fortino is in it too. What
Oh
else?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and what I think that would out of all of the films, that one tripped me out the most, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Not even because of the religious overtones.
Hmm.
When I first saw the shit monster, like if you're not expect, I mean, like, it's not scary, but because it's a goofy costume. But if when you're not expecting it, it's like, oh, what the like once you that aside, it's a phenomenal film. Like I said, even with the religious overtones, I mean that's another movie that got a lot of blowback. Which obviously, when you get into subject matter that's featured in Chasing Amy, that's featured in Dogma, it's going to create a lot of blowback in terms of controversy and things of that nature. But overall, it doesn't take away if you can set that to the side and just judge it strictly as a film and entertainment value. It's pretty good. It's a good film.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, like, Kevin Smith doesn't just show up in there with like the research of being like, oh, I was Catholic once. No, he goes into the hierarchy of angels. He goes into dogmatic law, the catechism. Like he did his research. And that's why like in the end they stopped picketing him, and then like there's a whole documentary on that too. I'm telling you, that's another podcast because there's a whole documentary on him being picketed and the picket and how they responded to it, and the fact that he had death threats
Yeah.
made as a result of making that movie just threw him for such a loop that that's actually the inspiration for Red State. So definitely watch Red State if you want to see how the fear of, the death threats devolved into, you know, well, I wouldn't say devolved, but created an inspiration for him to write his very first horror film. And so
So
it's based on religious fanaticalism, you know.
okay. So I'm gonna bring up two things. And I'm gonna tread lightly because I always like to be respectful of things.
Mhm.
So first up, while we got him up on the screen here, Banky in the film. They kind of like he's kind of portrayed as kind of like not a fearmonger, but almost like not the best way I can put it is he's almost he's almost presented as the guy that's like not anti-gay per se, but just kind of like maybe in denial about who he is, certain urges he may have, and also just kind of like downplaying a lot of it. Everything's gay, that's gay, this is gay, because that was just the time period of the '90s. Now,
Mhm.
do you think the way his character was kind of portrayed in the film? Do you think that they kind of like backpedaled or chickened out because it felt like they were going a certain direction once they got to a certain point in the film where it was like he was finally going to maybe address some things, but then they kind of like ixnayed it. So do you think that it would have made for a better character arc had they went in a different direction with the Benki character, or do you think that it pretty much was in line with how it was portrayed from the beginning?
Well, I want to put a disclaimer on my answers going forward for everybody. And that is my disclaimer is that I am not a person who lives a gay experience, or a lesbian experience, so I can't speak for that experience. But in terms of being a person who is a part of the LGBTQIA community, um, like what I will say is that I think it, the weakness in the character development of Banky is only brought on by the fact that, and this is the arching complaint about this movie. But I will make my case for this movie, but I do respectfully understand anybody who lives a gay experience, who has a gay, I should say, gay lived experience, or a lesbian lived experience, or anywhere else in the community lived experience that is different than mine. It's definitely up for scrutiny because of the fact it's written and directed by a straight man. All right, so we have to put that into context. But the character development weakness, I think, is you have a straight man. I believe, as far as we know, Jason Lee identifies as straight, cisgendered, heterosexual man playing a man who is in conflict with his sexuality. Like, you're not like and he's not given a script that's written by someone who's really had a lot of experience other than Kevin having a brother who is out as gay, um writing the dialogue, writing the script. So I feel like that's the deficit. So, but other than that, I think that's where the movie's arc of everything kind of falls
Yeah.
on a
And,
downward slope.
and I'm actually glad you brought that piece up because that kind of flows into our net. Might as well pull us up now. Our next actor, Joy
Mhm.
Lauren Adams. There's a lot to unpack with what you just said, so I'm going to do my best to kind of follow along because it kind of falls in line with the Banky argument and just a lot of the criticisms that I have seen leveled at the film, both at the time and I mean, it's kind of like it's weird. Like they didn't have as much criticism in the moment, but like as time has passed and obviously
Mhm.
LGBTQ is more represented in a positive light, certain things like this are kind of looked back on and armchair quarterback and this was wrong, that was wrong. Like but the main two complaints that I've seen leveled at the film, you brought up one of them. It was directed by a straight male, a straight white male.
Mhm.
The other aspect was it's seen from a film goer standpoint, it's seen through the lens of a straight white male, Ben Affleck's character. Like
Mm.
everything is seen through his lens. So people have, if you're from that community, you're going to be offended by that aspect, or some people within the community, not everybody. And then
Mhm.
there's even I saw a lot of blowback about Joey Lauren Adams, her portrayal, not even her portrayal, just her aesthetic look. Like she wasn't representative of what your typical lesbian quote unquote would look like. They felt like the character was beautified to kind of like convey a certain message. Like, okay, if you look like this, then you can get that type of thing. And also the other aspect that was kind of like jarring to me that I didn't even think about because full disclosure, I'm not a part of that community, but I sympathize with that community and their plight because being a black guy in America, I can understand like being marginalized as a minority. So I get it to a certain extent. But they also one of the other complaints that I saw level at the film, and I want to get your take on this, is the fact that the straight white male was the one to quote unquote fix the lesbian. That was another critique that I saw leveled at the film. That like if you just find the right guy, he'll fix you. He'll get you right. And that's why I'm kind of glad that the film ended the way that it did because I can kind of see that aspect of if they had ended up as a happy couple by the end, I could kind of see the argument coming from that community because it would be like, yeah, that's really not a good look because if you're trying to make a gay positive film, if you're trying to portray that lifestyle in a positive light, it's not a good look to have the main protagonist who's gay all of a sudden become straight by the end because she got with this guy over here who kind of like has a certain vision of how things should go in the world.
Mm. Um, like I said, like I don't my big disclaimer overall, I'm speaking, from like the privilege of being a queer, and I'm a queer person who is in a hetero presenting relationship. So that already might, check the box off for people to think I have a bias. But I think there's something to be said where a movie will be out, it won't hold up, but enough time passes and it comes back around again.
Yeah,
And the thing about chasing a movie like Chasing Amy is you have to understand, and I think that's why it's good. Like this is a big reason why I wanted to do this movie and have this you know out there in the interwebs, is for people to understand that like it's not the excuse that the movie came out at the time that it did. That's not its excuse for some of the discrepancies that and some of the things that didn't age well, and some of the flaws and having a straight woman, as far as I know, Joey Lauren Adams identifies as straight, portray a a character who is, billed in the movie as a lesbian who falls for a man. The reason why you have to understand that this movie was made when it was, and under the context of the time and the thinking that was, you know, around at that time, was the fact that first off, we're 97. This is Ellen coming out. That was huge. That was huge. Roseanne kissing a woman on the ship. Remember that? When she kissed Meryl Winningham?
yeah.
That all happened in the same year. When, and that was like stuff heard all around the world. That was not like there was nothing. There was no representation for queer people at this time that was this major before
And let
this.
and let the record show you had brought up Ellen because she would have been with Anne Heche at that time, correct?
What?
You brought out real quick. I gotta head this for the record. Ellen, she was with Anne Heche at that time, right?
I think that was around the time she came out, and Anne Heche got a lot of shit because she had been married to a man before she was with Ellen, and that's
Some
we could
some
get into
fortune.
a long
Yeah,
conversation, and there'll probably be people who would want to debate me about bi erasure, but at the time, bisexuality was right now even bisexuality is a difficult thing to discuss.
yeah, because
But
most people
back
believe. Yeah, most people
w-
just believe like once you're get with somebody of the same sex, then you have to be gay. There's no in between. But I just wanted to throw out real quick that it's funny you brought up Ellen because apparently, whoever she was with, let's for the sake of argument, let's just assume it was Han Heche. They actually went to a screening of Chasing Amy, according to Kevin Smith, and they walked out after the first half hour. I guess they
mhm,
heard one gay joke too many, and just said, "I can't do it."
yeah. And that's the problem with it being written by straight and acted by well, I mean, if Jason Lee had sensitivity to it, like I don't want to fault him for any his involvement, but yeah, it's a movie written by straight white men who are, and you have I don't know if you're going to get to him, but and I would definitely love to talk about him
I know
in
you're talking
terms
about.
of the BIPOC uh experience, but like um Hooper is the only actor in the whole movie that I think is the only real gay actor in the whole that like of the main characters. He's the
So
only
yeah,
one that's actually gay.
let's bring him up. You got Dwight Ewell.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he's pretty much positioned as the conscience of the film. Like he like out of everybody in the film, he's the only one that kind of operates on a common sense level. Even though like I said, he kind of like has to play into certain stereotypes to kind of like maintain his aura, his ability to make a living. But in those quiet moments, it's like, yeah, believe what I got to do to make a living. But that's just like that. That just is not an excuse for anything, but that's just like the time. Like you had to project a certain image. I had brought up when we were talking offline, a movie that Will Smith did early on in his career, 6 Degrees of Separation, where he played a gay character. Now,
Mhm.
if he were to do that today, it's just like he's had decades upon decades upon decades of a career established to where he could pretty much do anything, and people just be like, "Oh, he's just experimenting." At the time that he did that film, he was only Fresh Prince probably had only been on for like maybe 2 years, and he was starting to build the profile. But it's not like he had the profile that he has now to the point where he could shield any potential blowback
Mhm.
for playing that type of character. Especially you got a reputation as being like a ladies' man, of being a rapper, being this, being that. So kudos to him for like playing against type that early on in his career, taking those type of chances. But back then, especially during the 80s, 90s, playing those type of characters, I hate to say it like this, could have been a career killer. Um, if you had a certain image predating playing those type of characters, and I get the argument of having straight heterosexual white folks play gay characters, but to play devil's advocate to a point, it's still a business predicated on money and
Mhm.
having people in roles that know what they're doing. So in other words, and I can't speak to who might have been gay, identified as gay, lesbian, that would have been considered a good actor at the level that would have been needed for this film to make money. It was made on a budget of 250,000. It made 15.2 million, which is amazing.
Mhm.
But that was with the cast that they had in place. You got Ben Affleck, you got Jason Lee, you got Joey Lauren Adams, you got Dwight Ewell, you got these characters, you got these people, these professionals that have the training, the experience to pull off these complex roles. Who's to say that that money would have been made back with legitimate LGBTQ members? You know what I mean? So it's like you got to choose the hill to die on sometimes. And like I said, I understand like having accurate representation, but sometimes if that representation doesn't equal dollars and cents, that's why those decisions are made. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, Kevin Smith had to fight for the cast that he got because Miramax. Let me see. Let me pull up my notes here. Originally, they were going to give him a budget of 2 million for the film, but the contingency was that he cast David Schwimmer, from Friends, Ross,
Mhm.
Drew Barrymore, and Jon Stewart. Kevin Smith said no, with all due respect to those actors. He wanted to have his own team in place. He had his own people in mind. So he rejected the 2 million and took significantly less, 250,000, to make the film. But he had the right to cast who he wanted, which means a lot of these people were working basically on next to nothing.
Mhm.
A lot of this was done on the brother tip, like brother, I got you on the back end type thing. So yeah, but that's what it was. So if that money was made back off of the cast that he had, there's no guarantee that he would have made that money back if he had a got authentically gay and lesbian characters. Just to kind of like have people look at it from the business side of things. it's not always. I don't think not everything is meant as a personal attack or a personal affront to a group or anything like that. There are certain reasons and certain, and I definitely don't think Kevin Smith had a bias against using gay people. I mean, the whole reason the film was made was based off of experiences that his he felt like his brother, who was identified as gay, he wasn't being represented on film. His
Mhm.
his co-producer developed a crush, for lack of a better term, on another on a fellow gay filmmaker, that type of thing. So it was an amalgamation of things. So I don't think it was anything to do with bias. It was just about picking the best people for the job.
Yeah, and I think that um sometimes uh you have to let you just have to let yourself, cuz even just, you're coming off he came off of Mallrats, which was not successful. Like, people we're in a phase where Mallrats cult following made it successful. Like, and not even really, like, moderately successful. It's now like a classic, but it's a classic to the people who made it a cult, had a cult following to it. So, it's like Empire Records. It's like those films that its fan base made it what it is.
Yeah,
But, like, so he's coming off of Mallrats, which was, big with, I think he was with Warner Brothers when he did that, and it was a huge flop. So the fact that he's making to go in this direction, like, I think if he said, "Well, first you're gonna make Mallrats, and oh, it's gonna flop, and now you're gonna make a movie that is geared towards the gay community, or you want to write for with the gay community in mind? Are you crazy?"
yeah,
And the fact that it actually was, it became his second film that won at Sundance, like, is actually pretty wild. So you have to understand that he kind of went on faith, and I'm in by no means saying, and he'll be the first one to tell you, like, I didn't represent this community like too well, but uh, you know, the other piece that I'm getting at is, for me, like, I'm talking from my experience, and what this film did for me was it opened me up to understanding that it is possible to not everything isn't just gay and straight, black and white, like, that there's a spectrum. And actually, when you think about it, he's kind of predicting the future. But it was already going on. Like, there already was situations where many, I mean, even famous, like, people who had down low had homosexual relationships, had even the guy who wrote all those famous songs of the musicals in, like, the 1920s and 30s. I'm trying to think of his name. There's a movie about his life called The Lovely, and it's he was very much in love with his wife, but he was, for all intents and purposes, a gay man, and he
yeah,
was he was in love with his wife, but she was kind of like, his what we would call like a beard. But he loved her, and she loved him. She stayed with him because she loved him, but he really was, you know more gay, lived a gay lifestyle than anything else. So, that I think what makes people uncomfortable in this movie is that, it's to say that that sexuality is a choice. And what I think also puts people off is the learned through experience sexuality, female sexuality that's happening. And to have that type of representation in a movie, like, I'll be honest with you, was huge for me. Huge as a kid. Because all the things she was doing as a teenager, like, I'll be honest with you, growing up in Philly, in the city, we're Catholic school, like, a lot of my friends were promiscuous like that. And I won't even lie, like myself, we're promiscuous like that. And I think that message there falls. There's so many gems here that we can sit here and debate about who's writing it, like, forever. But, like, you guys are missing all these other gems of representation that are inside of this movie. But unfortunately, that's kind of to Kevin's detriment because of the dialogue he puts of, now today, a movie like this would not be made in the way that it's written and the dialogue that's in there because it's just littered with, like, Banky is just like, and even when he's talking,
And honestly,
Holden is telling him to shut up. Like, you're sounding so terrible. And I think, like, today's 20-year-olds, at least the ones that I've met, would have probably checked him right at the door at in the first F bomb, like, and I'm not talking about the FU bomb, but the other F bomb that he throws down. It's a totally different landscape than it was in 1997. And that's where I think it's not the excuse, it's the lens and the context of the time that has
yeah,
really changed. And unfortunately, that part of the movie hasn't aged well, you
and
know?
yeah, yeah, I'm not. You can't defend certain things. I would just say that, not to say that it's right, but I just feel like part of what's kind of like lost nowadays is that, like, I feel like you're not getting people's authentic selves in a lot of ways. I mean, like obviously it costs $0, right? Zero. I'm holding up to zero, folks. It costs zero
Mm,
dollars to be kind. We all know this from birth. And not trying
mm,
to excuse any type of language that was used in the film. Not certainly not going to use it here on this platform. But it's one of those things where, at least with a Banky type of character, you know where he's coming from, so you can match that energy. Nowadays, you never truly know if somebody is giving you their true authentic feelings, or if they're just biting their tongue because it's the politically correct thing to do, or
mm,
they're fear of getting canceled type of thing. So on the one hand, I do uh appreciate where this new era is coming from in terms of being more proactive in how you treat people and language used. But on the other hand, I feel like you're kind of like you're kind of like you're basically kind of putting yourself in like a situation where you never know where somebody is authentically coming from. At least back in the era that we came up in, you kind of could know where somebody was coming from head on. It might have not been politically correct. It might have not been particularly polite. It might have been very much mean spirited and rooted in a lot of hatred, but at least you knew what you were dealing with.
mm,
Nowadays, things are hidden behind smiles, and because it's like the minute you turn that corner, those those f bombs are going to come a flying. Once they're behind closed doors, they're going to come a flying, and you won't be the wiser. And I'm one of those people that, especially at this big age of mine, I would rather know where you're coming from rip, as
mm,
opposed to having to wonder and figure it out. So I feel like, just for the sake of just authenticity, I feel like I wish a movie like this could be made today in its original form, dialogue and all, because I feel like it would hopefully convey to people to just say it like you mean it. If you're feeling
mm,
away, Just kind of like lay your cards on the table, so that way people can make their own educated decision on whether they want to deal with you or not.
Yeah, but I also appreciate the reverence because but I will tell you that uh, working so I used to work with at-risk teens, and I sat in, I had teens that were um cisgendered and hetero, at least they seemed to present as heterosexual. And and in the same group, I had teens that were not, and I had some trans teens, and
Mm.
that experience was interesting to me because you know there was a lot of progress that had happened. There was a lot of there was a little bit of fear, and even by those teens that were not they were worried about how they would be perceived by the cisgendered heterosexual people, especially the boys. And
Mm.
their conversations were so great, but there was also still a lot of that ignorant language um was still there. So
Ah.
it's not like that's completely gone. And I honestly think that's just but I think it was a lot more respectful, and because we're in a group therapy setting, I think it was understood that they were not trying to be disrespectful. They were just trying to be curious and educate themselves, which I think is the difference. I mean, I never saw that as a teenager in the 90s. Never. You were being gay was bad, and that was it. You know,
Yeah.
and anything in between you had to
Yeah.
keep under wraps, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, I guess like, well, maybe not to that extreme. I think that part of the discourse comes from the fact that like for example, if you kind of like keep it on like film and television related, since that's where we're at with it. Like you look at a film like I'm sorry, you look at a show like Will and Grace. Now, full disclosure, I was actually a fan of that show. It was a well written, funny show. Towards the end, the later seasons, but for the most part, it was a very well written show. Now, I'm trying to remember the one character is Jack. I can't remember the actor's real name, but on the show, he was very much flamboyant. And then you had the other character that was pretty subdued. You wouldn't know
Mhm.
if he was gay or not unless he came out and said it. Now,
Mhm.
Jack, who was more flamboyant, would kind of like lean into a lot of the traditional tropes that people have of what gay people are, which is it obviously it comes from a place of ignorance because not every the same way every black person don't act the same. Not every gay person represents what you see on television or through their caricatures. Do you have some people that act like that? Of course, but is that representative of everybody? No. But I feel like part of the discourse, maybe from a heterosexual standpoint, is you'll see people within that culture, within the gay culture, within that community, throw around certain slurs with each other, and then it's like a okay. But I guess that just comes down to being a part of being in the community, being in the thick of things, to kind of like have that cachet to say it to another. It's hard for us to say it to each other, but if an outsider says it, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and it is that kind of, I think every subculture has we can call each other that till the cows come home, but let anybody outside of our subculture say it and
Yeah,
we'll beat you up. Don't
yeah,
even don't
yeah,
even think about f around and find out, um yeah, I do think though, we can't mistake reverence. We also have to understand that the fact that we've come far enough for people to have reverence enough to not talk because they know that they're not going to be received well is is progress in a sense, but like what I try to hit the beat I'm trying to hit with this movie, for me, this is my personal experience. This is how this movie made me feel personally. Was like, I mean, when I watched it back in, well, it wasn't 97, but it was like at least 99 or 2000. When I watched it back then, I was rooting for them to stay together. Now that I'm older, I understand why, if Kevin had written it to where they stayed together, that movie would be a totally different thing. It would have been terrible. It would have been a terrible like, and spoiler alert, like they don't end up together. Um,
Now
and
they
I
kind
think
of,
it's really
but he,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but he kind of retconned it a little bit with reboot, where they did
What'd you
kind of
say?
end up. I f- didn't he retcon that a little bit with reboot?
Yeah, he well with reboot, there's some Kevin's in his
Inconsistencies.
I'm making movies for myself and not for everybody era now, and I love that for him so much. I have a lot. Now that's a movie I have problems with, but I had to sit back and be like, it's a movie, Tina. Just enjoy the ride. And this is Kevin Smith. This is his world. Like, we're in it. Like, just put your seatbelt on and just get in the
Inc-
car.
Inconsistencies be damned.
Yeah, I don't like. He's very proud of that whole monologue with he um and how he like puts closure on the relationship between Holden and Alyssa. But I that you're not gonna get like a good review of that from me. I felt where he left them was good, and he also left it with like um for the imagination. He left it up to the viewer's imagination. Did they ever reconnect again? Did they, no, now we have an idea. And for some people that closure is probably good. For me, I didn't need that. I liked the way he left it. I liked that he also showed that there are relationships that you have in life that, even though you seem like soulmates and you seem like you can never live without each other, like that, sometimes that it still doesn't end up working out, and that the only purpose, both of them learned a lot about themselves. Like, for what we know, Alyssa, realized that, like, she can't really like, her happiness and her the kind of relationships she may want a relationship with someone like Holden, but she doesn't need one. And the same goes for Holden. He may
Well,
want a relationship with Alyssa, but he wants it for the wrong reasons. Cuz he
no,
thinks, and that's the point that Hooper makes, is that he thinks that it's a novelty that when he assumes that he is she's boldly going where no lesbian has gone before.
yeah, and that's kind of like that. That's a whole other discussion because I have my thoughts on that, and this has nothing to do with the sexuality of the person, but it's just a
Mhm.
matter of, I believe when you're in a relationship, especially a new relationship, it's always best to start at square zero and just
Mhm.
kind of like start anew and just focus on each other. Like unless it comes down to like health related reasons and things of that nature, making sure everybody's good to go. Um, I don't really think that no I think no good comes from talking about your past in terms of like relationships, in terms of who you've been with, or body counts and things of that nature, because that essentially is what tore them apart. and that kind of like extends to the real life Kevin Smith and Joy Lauren Adams piece, because I guess in real, art imitated life and life imitated art with Holden and Alyssa and him and Joe, because it was one of those things where he felt, I don't want to say inadequate, but almost felt like insecure about the fact that the woman that he was attracted to and chose to be with had more, for lack of a better term, more life experience. And
Mhm.
then it's like you start to feel a certain way, and that was projected in the film. Like he felt like, well, like when it was just women, it was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But the minute he found out other men were involved, it's like, ugh, he couldn't deal with that because he was. I could already see, you could see it in his eyes. He was mentally comparing himself to them, which is the absolute. I implore anybody out there, that's the worst thing you can do. Don't ask questions that you do not want the answers to. Do not ask questions you do not want the answers to, because no good ever comes from it.
Well, yeah, and there's like another thing is there's a raw truth that's revealed in the relationship. Like that was actually Alyssa's fault for not being upfront with him about it. That's where I feel her only one of her only faults is in the situation there, and in terms of is not telling him because but I also think it's a common now here's where my I'm a marriage and family therapist in training. So here's where my, training comes in is that, we think that uh, we should be able, this would be what as the kids call a red flag. If you ever feel instinctually that you can't share something with your partner because you're out of fear that you'll lose them. That's already if she already thinks that in her head, like I can't tell Holden this piece of my past because he'll reject me. If you think by any chance there's any doubt in your mind that he wouldn't accept you, then that's already your red flag for him. And there was probably something, we might be really deeply analyzing these characters, but if we really do look at it, like the one thing that you can kind of tell from Holden and his attitude is that he wouldn't. But Alyssa's so in love with him that she doesn't want to risk the truth,
No,
and that truth is that if she's already sensing off of him instinctually that she can't share something like that with him, then
I'm.
the gay thing has nothing to do with why that relationship is doomed to fail. It's
Oh no,
actually like the insecurities between the two of them, and the lack of uh
communication.
yeah, and the growth that comes too late. But I believe that there are some relationships you have that are meant to teach you these things, and it sets you up so that hopefully in your next relationship, now Holden isn't going to hold anybody to that standard. Hopefully he's
I mean,
definitely learned that lesson.
yeah, yeah, just don't. No, and honestly, I feel like the downfall of. I actually think that the blame is mutual. I think the downfall from a holding standpoint is once he found out that she was a lesbian, I feel like whatever infatuation or attraction he had, that should have been stopped right there. It should have been like did it right there, because I feel like, and I'm going to actually cue up some clips to kind of back up what I'm saying. It
Mhm.
felt like once he found that out, he still kind of like had it in his head that even though it wasn't explicitly say he didn't explicitly say this, I can fix her. and I'm gonna like
Mhm.
I'm gonna cue up the conversation because you can even see the look on her face as as she's talking. Like on the one hand, and this has nothing to do with anybody's sexuality. Like we all want on some level someone to say to us what he said to her in that moment. And I'm
Mhm.
not. It was definitely sincere, but I just feel like when you we all know deep down, like we've all had crushes, we've all had like infatuations, and it's not limited to age. It could be when you're a kid, when you're a preteen, young adult, old person. We've all had like those crushes, those like those things that we know we can't truly have for whatever reason. Like it's already been established that there's no interest, at least on that level, but we still try to force it. And I feel like by forcing it, he kind of opened himself up to that pain. It could have been avoided if he had just left it at I like her, but we're only meant to be friends based off of what I'm seeing. She kind of like, and in situations like that, even after he poured his heart out, I really feel like in that moment that would have been a time to say, you know what, I appreciate where you're coming from, but it can't happen. It can't because it's only going to lead to a lot of unnecessary heartbreak for you and me if we go down this road. You already know what I'm into. You're not really because even when they had that whole monologue where he sits her and Banky down, and he basically only in movies he proposes a three way to kind of like wash away all of their problems because
Mhm.
like you're trying to manufacture, but like she said, she did those things because she wanted to. She was trying to like experiment and figure out who she is. She didn't grow up knowing, oh, I I need to be with guys, or you grew up knowing who you were. Like so, but I had to find myself. This isn't you. You don't want to go down this path because I've seen what it can do to people. I've seen what it does to me. So I feel like he kind of like brought on a lot of that pain himself. And
Mhm.
I feel like she brought on a lot of pain by not letting him down easy. Not even it shouldn't have been allowed to get to a relationship point. And if you'll indulge me, let me see, cue up this clip here as I show you my last bit from the cast. The most
Mhm.
subdued Jason Mewes ever captured on film.
Mhm.
like, like I gotta say, this was probably the most subdued version of Jay and Silent Bob ever captured on film.
Mm.
Okay,
And
so
and to to go off that, my fiance, who is your friend Darnell, and I had him watch this, and he really gets a kick out of Kevin Smith movies for Jay and Silent Bob. And I warned him. I said, "This movie, they're very low key. They're the most low key, even though they are the star of the comic book that they're writing, that Banky and Holden are writing, and they're getting their royalty checks here, or their whatever it is for their image and likeness, I guess. And but they are very subdued in this, but I don't really think it takes away from them. They're still Jay and Silent Bob. You just see them. And then Darnell even pointed out this is the first time he sees Bob talk so much. And I'm like, yeah, I think this is the most he talks. It's like it's slowly, in Clerks you have his famous line, which, about the lasagna.
yeah,
And then in Mallrats, he just has his Star Wars reference. But then this, you get an entire monologue from Kevin. And so
yeah,
people know Kevin now as a talker, but you have to understand when we watched this movie in the late 90s, early 2000s,
It was a big
this
deal.
was a big deal because we knew Silent Bob as actually being silent, and Jay was the one who talked too much.
And honestly, you got to remember, like back then. I mean, obviously, if you were in the know, like you said, if you were a cinephile, you knew that Silent Bob and Kevin Smith were one and the same. But a lot of people didn't necessarily know that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it wasn't like it was like with Spike Lee. Like all of his movies had the tagline "A Spike Lee joint," so you
Mhm.
knew like you when he popped up in a film, even though he was never technically the star, you knew who he was.
Mhm.
Whereas with Silent Bob was just Silent Bob. To if you were a layperson, if you were just somebody sitting down and watch the movie, you would just think that he was just another character in the movie. You didn't necessarily put two and two together like, oh, that's the guy that made the movie. Nowadays, obviously, with social media and the ability to cross reference with the internet, you can put two and two together pretty quickly. But back then, you didn't necessarily think, oh, this is the guy that made the movie. Unless, like I said, you were a cinephile or you were a person that was watching like Extra and E and Access Hollywood and shows like that to put two and two together.
Yeah. And I don't want to like hold you up from showing the clips, but I will give you like a quick my I did meet Jason Mewes, and I just wanted to, because the story is so great, I want to have it recorded. So we went, me and my cousin Erin, who I love Kevin Smith, she loves Jason Mewes. And honestly, we are Silent Bob and Jay. Like really, like when we get together, we are them. So, we go to the Hellerman Ballroom in Manhattan for an evening with Kevin Smith. We're coming out of that and we're walking to the train station, and Jason Mewes pops up out of nowhere, and he's like, "Yo, do you guys know how I can get to the front of this place?" And we all go in unison, "Yeah, it's right behind you, Jason." And he's like, "Oh, thanks." And my cousin's fiance at the time goes, "Hey, can we get a picture?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And then all of us girls gather around him, and he just goes, "Ladies, ladies, ladies." And we got a picture with him. So I'll send you the picture if you want to put it in the notes with this. It's a
Oh,
pretty funny
cool.
picture. It's a pretty funny picture because my cousin is meeting Jason Mewes for the first time. She's like has her arm around his waist, and he has a shirt that says "I'd F me," and her head is covering the me, so it just looks like it says "I'd F" and then her face. So my apologies to Jordan Monsanto, his wife. She's a wonderful person and pretty much saved Kevin's life. So no disrespect to her, but like needless to say, it was a moment to remember for my cousin, and well for all of us too.
Now, I've heard that story. That's an amazing story. I feel like I've never met either gentleman, Jason or Kevin, but I feel like once I kind of like got myself really immersed into the Viewersky universe, I feel like the thing that blew my mind the most is when I first heard Jason Mewes speak out of character. Wow, that's the first thing I could. He really talks like that. Like yeah. Even Chris, he gave me the heads up. Yeah, that's really him. Like it's not too much acting involved. Cause like I said, he was more well versed than Kevin Smith by that point than I was. So when I first heard Jason Mewes like out of character, just talking, I'm like, damn, he really talk like that. Like that just kind of blew my mind. Like because you're thinking like to a point like there's a fine line between the character and the person, and you're thinking like, okay, they might be part of him in the character, but it's no way like grown man is walking around talking like this. But you learn something new every day.
Yeah, he really is. You know, what you see is what you get. But I have to give him a lot of credit because and especially if anybody also listening gets a chance to check out their podcast, Jay and Silent Bob Get Old. They have a newer one out now that's like a little bit different, where Jason Mewes isn't, because that was his recovery podcast, and I think they've switched gears now because he's been in recovery for a very long time. God bless him. But if you listen to some of those stories and some of the stuff he's gotten into when he was an addict, when he was like an active addict, the fact that he's here, and I have to give a lot of credit. A lot of people make jokes about him as Jay and stuff like that, but I give him a lot of credit. Anybody who's been down that road and has been able to bring themselves around the way Jason Mewes has, like, he does deserve a lot more credit for that than he gets.
Oh, for sure. Big, big, big time. Like when I first found out how bad his drug problems really were, to the point where it was a few years where they had a split because Kevin just said like, look, I love you, my friend, but I can no longer work with you because it's not like it's like it was like the gift and the curse, because when they got together young in their early to mid 20s, they were doing some of the same things, but obviously Kevin had to like keep it together more because this was his livelihood.
Hmm.
Jason, he didn't really have any he was just a buddy. He didn't have any prior acting experience. He didn't really aspire to be an actor. It was literally just something he fell into. Like it was just like, all right, Jay, just be you. That's essentially how he got into acting.
Hmm.
They put a camera in his face and said, just be yourself. Because like he's a charismatic guy, and he's able to like the best way I can describe it is some people just have a knack and just pick things up, because you can't just take anybody off the street and do what he did. Like literally, he
Hmm.
just had. Luckily, he had like the right friends to kind of teach him like some of the technical aspects of things, but a lot of that charisma you can't teach that. So it was like a combination of the two. But back to my original point, I didn't know how bad the drug problem really got, and I think it was right around the time they did Clerks 2. It's kind of like when they kind of like started to mend fences, because I feel like it had reached a boiling point with Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And it was like it was a miracle that that even got made, because I guess he was pretty much off the rails by that point. You wouldn't be able to tell from the movie because the movie came out good, but I guess behind the scenes, just to kind of like a lot of things had to get pieced together, and by the time that was done, that's when the split happened, and then it was pretty much a 4 or 5 year split, and then they kind of like reconnected first. Hey, make sure like he was starting to get his life together, and then hey, you seem to be on the right foot, so now I can trust you again, and the Clerks too, and then here we are, almost 20 years later, which I can't believe I'm saying Clerks 2 is almost 20 years old now.
Yeah, that's wild. I that's something that movie I did thoroughly enjoy all the way through. And when I first saw it, I didn't, um, because I was like, well, they're gonna. I was just, I went to see it in the movie theater, and I was like, how are they gonna do this? Are they gonna do it all in black and white again? And I did like that they did. He did switch to color, and he did, um, do as much as he could with Randall and Dante, but I don't know about Clerks 3. I don't, but that's another podcast. But
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I can't believe it's almost been 20 years, and I still can't believe he got Rosario Dawson, which just solidified her to me as an extremely cool person. I love Rosario Dawson.
Well, I hate to do this to us because this has been a fantastic conversation, but I'm looking at our time clock here. About to get
Mm,
cut off in a minute. So we're gonna actually have to show this one, folks. But have no fear, because I'm gonna hopefully be able to twist this young lady's arm to come back. because we're going to do a part two to this, which I was not expecting, but yeah, we got to do a part two
Mhm.
to kind of like really kind of dive deep into the film. But it just goes to show you how meaty the subject matter is that we were able to s- glean 2 hours out of just like the cast and the background and just different opinions on X, Y, and Z. But we're going to shelve this conversation for now, but we're going to come back for a part two, and part two will be a deep dive into Chasing Amy, beginning to end, clips and all. So until next time, thanks for tuning in. I'm Soapbox Ant. She's Tina. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.